A historic moment for India and the European Free Trade Association. A trade deal finally has been signed after 16 years and 21 rounds of hard negotiations. I'm being joined by one of the key persons who was negotiating this trade deal from Switzerland. I'm being joined by Ms. Elena Burliger, who is the Swiss State Secretary for Economic Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us here on India Today. Let's begin with the trade deal itself. Hard negotiations, but this very well could be one of the last important deals that India would be signing before it goes into elections. How did you make it happen?
With, I think, hard dedication, with the fact that we really intensified our discussions, and I think at the back of our mind, both the Indian side and EFTA, we knew that we're only going to see success if it's a balanced deal, if it's a fair and equitable deal, and if we don't touch each other's sensitivities. And I think that was really good. The first time I came, a bit more than a year ago, we sort of agreed that that was going to be sort of the framework. And whenever one or the other side, started to touch on these red lines, I call them, we could say, no, sorry, this is sensible, or India could say this is sensible. So quite pragmatic, and towards the end it really became also a trusted relationship where we could signal each other the difficulties. And then many visits, many travels, many phone calls, many video conferences, so really hard work.
How important was it for Switzerland to see this deal through? Because we've seen the pace that it picked up in the past 1 year with your meetings with Minister Piyush Goyal, not just in India, but across the globe, and then 7 visits to India alone. So how important was it for Switzerland to get this through?
Extremely important, otherwise I wouldn't have come 7 times. And India was one of our white spots. Switzerland has a long tradition of free trade agreements. We have over 30 free trade agreements. Some we have done individually, and the majority we have negotiated together with our partners from the European Free Trade Association. But there was this large white spot in Asia, and we said it's now or never. It cannot continue another 16 years. Either we get it done or probably it's not doable. And with this attitude, my team and I went at it. And I have to say, on the other side, I also encountered a team with that same we need to make it happen attitude.
I interviewed you not so long ago, Secretary Burliger, and the fact is that I was quite skeptical because the code of conduct is going to hit very soon with the elections being announced. And I kept saying, how will you really do it? But it has happened. A very important announcement was also the $100 billion investment plans. What are the commitments, assurances, plans to really bring in that capital?
Yes, so it's private sector investment. Switzerland is very much a bottom-up country. It's unfortunately not up to me with a magic wand and saying to this company or to that company. It's really private sector investment. But let me dial back. I told you, we sort of said, as a framework, it needs to be a balanced deal. And of course, if India is giving us market access for goods, and it's a 1.4 billion market, and it's an economy that aims to be 3rd largest global economy. And I come with 9 million inhabitants. We're not that small. We're 20th largest market, but nevertheless, you could sense that there is a disbalance in it. And so we put some thought into it. And for us, actually, the most natural thing is foreign direct investment, because we do that all the time. We're 6th largest or 7th largest investor in the US. So this is not something new for us. And in the end, we also realized that India is a young country. You have many young people which are very talented. They graduated from grade school. So we also understood that India will need jobs. And so we struck a balance. We're getting access for our goods, but at the same time, we're pledging these 100 billion FDI within 15 years and 1 million jobs. And it's linked. Should we not meet the goals? Because the other thing, you have very tough negotiators. They said, well, we can't give you hard access, lower tariffs, and then you have access to our market and you just sign an MOU.
It can't be a one-way street.
It really needs to. And we said, yes, we understand, and we're fully committed. And I also have to say that I got great backing from Swiss industries. I've consulted, of course. I could not just, do a private sector pledge. Let's do 100 billion, and then my companies read it in the newspaper. So we did large consultations with industries, with sector association, and I noted that there is a massive appetite to come to India. So it's linked. In 15 years, should we be far away from these, I must say, incredible numbers? Then, of course, India would have an instrument in its hand to potentially unilaterally reduce again the access for goods. So I think very cleverly we managed to play on each other's strength.
Which is a very important thing, job assurances and investments coming into India. But you spoke about our market access and more access to the huge Indian market. But tariffs have always been a concern. We've looked at various free trade agreement negotiations that are still underway with various countries and blocs, but none have been really successful because of the tariffs, because of the access and sort of protectionist environment that India has. So what were the niggling areas when it comes to market access?
So first of all, I think our economies are quite complementary. Second of all, EFTA is not a threat. We're not competing on cheap prices or masses. We're competing on quality, on high tech, on innovation, on it's I would say smart FDI. So I think we're probably maybe less of a threat than other partners that you're currently negotiating. I think that's one. And then second, the principle of not wanting to hurt each other. So we also really took good care of each other's sensitivities. I give you an example. Of course, Swiss cheesemakers would have loved to get a better deal out of this free trade agreement. But I think in my first meeting with Minister Goyal, he told me, don't ask any dairy tariff reductions because that's extremely sensitive. I have a lot of smallholder farmers, often single women with 2 free cattle or 2 free goats. And, as a small country that's also quite protective of our farmers, we could immediately understand each other. And I said, okay, I'm not going to pressure on cheese, although that would have been amazing for our farmers. But I think that understanding of each other's sensitive has helped us a lot. We're only 4 of us, huh?
Yes.
And we've been in this business for some time, so and we pride ourselves that we are pragmatic and goal-oriented, and that we're also listening to the other side. So I think the fact that we very much respected each other has helped a lot.
That's a very important example you give, because there are people who would be concerned about the competitive edge that companies from these parts of the world would get over smallholders here, MSMEs here in India. Having said that, there are concessions that that Switzerland also had to make when it comes to gold. How do you view the concessions on gold? So that you did not get, actually.
Right. No, we didn't. Gold was signaled to us as a sensitive item. You have to understand, so the gold is actually not coming from Switzerland. Switzerland is a trading hub, not only for gold, for other commodities as well. So, of course, we have refineries in Switzerland. And don't get me wrong, they are amazing to have them in Switzerland, but it's not a massive contribution to our GDP. So again, having that conversation, getting from the get-go, that was actually the second item we discussed after cheese and dairy, getting that signal early on in the conversation. Of course, we could readjust and say, okay, pity, but there is clearly a sensitivity on your side, so let's not touch it.
Then what about the pharma sector, the big data exclusivity that could make Indian drugs more expensive. What were the conversations there? How did you navigate that space?
So there I have to be really clear. We have reached an IPR chapter which is really in accordance with what India has agreed upon in the framework of WTO. So we didn't do a TRIPS plus or plus text. I think there's been some misunderstanding. I also saw some text floating around in India press. So those are not the texts that are in the agreement. And so that's one. Second, Switzerland is fully aware that access to public health is a human right. We are actually strong development partners with many African countries, with countries in Southeast Asia, with countries also in Latin America, and we have funded ourselves millions and millions during decades so that people could have access to public health. We believe that protecting intellectual property rights actually can work very well also with the generic industry and with granting access for people which have had less fortunate lives than you and I had. So these things are in our mind not connected. We actually also generic drugs are used in Switzerland. So really the innovative pharmaceutical products and genericas, they can live a perfect life among each other. But important to say that India first of all, India is a tough negotiator. So they would not just believe me if I would give them a text. And secondly, they have not gone further than what they already have agreed under the TRIPS agreement.
So it's not going to make the drugs made in India more expensive,
no.
Is it not?
No.
Okay. What are the competitive edges that you think, what are the industries that would have a competitive edge from Switzerland? Not just in India, but being in India across the world.
So I think, as I said, Switzerland is in size a smaller country, 9 million. So, and first of all, we lack land. And frankly speaking, we also lack human talent. When I go and speak to Swiss companies, very high up on their concern is actually how can I recruit my human talent? Because in Switzerland, the so-called baby boomers are soon going to retire. If you look at our childbirth rate, so clearly we're missing
young people
to work in our companies. So Swiss companies for some time now have actually started manufacturing across the world, and this is where I see the complementarity. So I'm not here to try to set up the big next industrial complex in Switzerland. That might as well happen here in India, and it can be funded, and technology transfer, the apprenticeship model, and all that, we can bring that to India, and it can happen in India, and from India it will go maybe back to Switzerland or to the rest of the world. I think this is the image and the vision that one needs to have.
The fact that you spoke about people and human resources in terms of mobility, is there anything in the agreement that talks about visas and mobility of Indians also then going to Switzerland?
Yes, this is the so-called Mode 4, and we have, so this TEPA also includes not only access for goods, but we're also trying to create access for people and services. And one of the big asks by India, and we were, after I have to tell you, also convincing, the line ministries back in Switzerland, we have been able to discuss audiovisual services and see how we can better grant access. Given Bollywood and whatever is happening in India, you are absolutely excellent there. And then, of course, business visas and so on will also be part of this TEPA.
Switzerland has always been a hot destination for Bollywood. We've had a lot of movies that are shot there. I hope it only increases. But how does this now help India's chances with European Union trade deal? How does it help European Union to really look at India and get that free trade agreement through? Is this going to be a framework for others?
I believe so, because India for us for the longest time was perceived, maybe wrongly so, but was perceived to be quite a protectionist, closed up country. And we've actually started to note, things are changing under the leadership of His Excellency Prime Minister Modi, when you signed with Australia an early harvest deal, and then soon after that you actually signed a free trade agreement with UAE. And this is when our ambassador here actually called me and said, listen, we need to get ready, things are moving in India. And I think this is definitely the sign that you're giving. By signing with us, that you are truly open for business and that it's doable to get across the finishing line. And I think that's an important sign. And of course, some of the chapters that we have now finalized will be a blueprint, I'm sure, for others.
Does this translate into ease of doing business as well with India?
So that's, of course, our key ask, because if we are to bring, or our companies are to bring $100 billion US dollar, of course, ease of doing business is a key ask on our side. If we don't have the framework conditions, it'll be difficult. This TEPA now gives that business certainty, investment certainty, which Swiss companies love. But I've also had the privilege to meet the head of Invest India, and I've actually asked her, can she maybe have a dedicated EFTA team? Because I guess now the news is out. I'm already, my phone is ringing every
Non-stop.
2 seconds. Everybody is excited in Switzerland. So I think it will be key that we really closely work with Invest India. I'm also hoping that potentially they might open up an office in Switzerland so that they can be much closer to the ground in Switzerland. I've always used to say to Minister Goyal, once we sign, then the real work starts. Then we really have to make it happen, because I'm, of course, ambitious. I don't want this to be just a success for the drawer in my office. We also measure how companies actually use free trade agreements, and we will promote it. I'm sure I'll be back here for economic and investment missions. So there's lots of activities that we're planning. Otherwise, it would be a pity, for all the work that we put into.
Absolutely. So the India-EFTA trade deal is primarily an economic agreement, has a lot of layers of political, strategic importance, growing importance. But there's also one niggling area when it comes to territory. How did you navigate that space? Given that there are differences in how world community looks at disputed territories, and for India it's important that territories such as Kashmir, other areas in the east are recognized as Indian territory. So how was that space been navigated?
So Switzerland is a neutral country, and in these difficult questions, and we recognize that they're difficult. We're looking towards international law, and we're looking towards the UN to settle all of this. India, of course, has a different view. To a certain extent, has also its constitution that it needs to honor. So we did what I would call the brotherly or sisterly way. They put into the TEPA what they believe is the legal grounds, and we directed ourselves to international law.
On that note, Secretary Burliger, many congratulations on this massive achievement between India and the four nations, and you represent Switzerland. So thank you so much for joining us here on India Today. It is a historic moment, also maybe one of the biggest last deals for India before India gets into election mode. Secretary Burliger, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today.
Thank you very much for supporting us.